All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo Sports Talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you to everyone out there, as always, for listening to the show, for watching. We are actually live on the video side, too, on a Wednesday night. Thank you very much. Also want to thank today's sponsor, Sunny Reds, 1841 Aber Road in Lackawanna, just minutes away from Highmark Stadium. A lot to get to. Again, on the video side, we are live, and I'm joined right now, as usual, my weekly visit, although a day later than normal. But my guy, Matt Warren, SB Nation. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Oh, it's been a pretty hectic. I would say week, but it really was like it started last week. I mean, it's been almost 7 full days of just wall to wall news around the NFL and especially around Buffalo. I mean, Brandon Beane, we, we say Beane after dark, like as like we're kidding, but like I don't know if this guy has slept in the last 7 days.
Well, we'll talk about Joe Bosa signing. It was 9:22 on Tuesday. I'll tell you a little funny little story about that in just a few minutes. Again, on the video side, podcast is business as usual on the audio side. On the video side, we're actually live here Wednesday night around 9 p.m. You happen to be checking it out, you want to leave a comment, do so. I'll put a couple up on the screen. Maybe I'll try to save a few and bounce back near the end, like I usually do when I have Joe from Queens on every Sunday night. So if you want to be involved in the conversation, by all means, be my guest. This was I'll give the Bills this much, Matt. Now we're 3 days in. If anything happens, we got the tweet tech up, so we'll have to break in. Casey Toohill just signed with Houston, former Buffalo Bill. Um, it's been an active couple days for the Bills. I was a little bit concerned, especially the way Monday started, that the Bills really didn't come out of the gates firing. Let's just put it that way. So I was a little concerned about how long it might take to get things going, and if they would. Um, I love how active they've been. I'm going to shoot straight with you and everybody who listens. I'm not sure how I feel about the players right now that they've signed. I don't know that I love the players. Having a heat of the moment, instant reaction, and then having some time to kind of think about things a little bit. Sometimes those can produce different results. This is a true wait and see situation for me with a lot of these guys. I'm not confident either way. Let me ask you this before we get into specific players or even positional groups and stuff like that. Are you is this pretty much what you expected in terms of what the Buffalo Bills were going to do? We'll get into the players specifically in just a few here, but being active, they've signed what, 3 defensive linemen already. They've made a bunch of moves. They've re-signed a couple of their own. One surprise, I would call a big surprise, at least to many people. Matt Collins leaving the Bills for New England, but all in all, it's been a pretty eventful, busy week with a big name signing, which we're going to get to in just a minute here. What were your initial thoughts with this week so far?
I mean, I think they've done more than I was expecting. So I, we've been saying all along that they were going to do something at that edge rusher position, and obviously they
Mhm.
addressed that kind of in 2 different ways. And so they do have kind of a glut at the defensive line right now. So we'll see kind of how that all shakes out. And I know you and I will get into it a little bit more specifically, but that as far as the retaining guys, like to your point, Matt Collins was a surprise that they weren't able to get him under contract. He signed a nice deal in New England, and good for him.
Yeah.
But like the other re-signings, like I mean, Ty Johnson, Reed Ferguson, Reggie Gilliam. I guess we can lump Darrington Evans in there. Like I mean, those guys were kind of expected. Even Damar Hamlin, we'll get into him more specifically later. But like those were kind of expected. The Khalil Shakir one was kind of expected. The Rousseau one was kind of expected. Bernard expected. So like it, how fast they came out was kind of surprising to me because it was like one right after the other, right after the other, right after the other. But just I think most of this stuff was kind of expected. To your point.
So Tuesday, I I work on Tuesday. I kind of explained this yesterday. Now you do this full time, Matt. This is your gig. What you do with SB Nation, Joe Marino, Lockdown Bills. He's a full timer. The vast majority of people that you listen to out there or that you watch out there this is a hobby, a part-time job, whatever you want to call it, including myself. Like I have work in real life as well. Typically on Tuesdays, so people understand this, Matt Warren and I record every Tuesday morning at around 11 a.m. because typically I got to go to work later and typically not too much happens past lunchtime. That's so important that, it's like if we miss talking about it, it's not that big of a deal. Could just address it the following day. A couple weeks ago, when free agency started, or before it started, you and I talked, and I said, you know what? I'm going to have you on a day later this week, and I'm going to have you recording late with me just so we can get through all the news of the day. So anyway, yesterday being Tuesday, I didn't have you on during the day. I had to go to work, and I'm frantically trying. I knew I was going to have to do a podcast, okay? I thought maybe I was just going to do an audio only show just because it would be a lot easier that late at night. I wasn't going to be able to record till at least 10 p.m. So it's during the day, and the Bills, Darrington Evans signs with the Bills, and then Ty Johnson re-signs with the Bills. I'm like, all right, well, today's podcast is going to be focused around the Bills, solidifying their running back room. They're literally running back the running back room next year, which they are. So I was like prepared to talk about that. And you mentioned the Beane After Dark thing. And I looked, it was 9:22 p.m. out of the blue, just like with Von Miller, but that was during the day on day 2. Because I remember that very much as well. But with Joey Bosa, 9:22 p.m., literally out of the blue, Bills sign Joey Bosa, $12.6 million contract, $12 million guaranteed 1-year deal. I was at Imperial Pizza actually at the time. Okay. So I know people there stunned, like it broke, people instant reactions. And I'm glad I was at Imperial because you got to see people reacting in real time. And everybody was like, wow. Nobody was like, yeah, that's awesome. Nobody was like, oh shit, what a stupid move. Everybody was just kind of stunned and flabbergasted a little bit. Like, wow. Wow. Before we talk about Joe Bosa, like, what was your thought initially when you saw that? That had to be a surprise. You and I have talked about a lot of free agents. I know you've written about a lot of potential fits for Buffalo. I never spent 5 seconds of any show over the last 3 weeks talking about Joe Bosa. I just didn't see that happening. What was your initial thought to that actual signing by Brandon Beane?
Yeah, I was surprised. Like you said, there were no leaks about it, no rumors, nothing like smoke, none of that stuff. And so just to hear it like was a done deal, like right off the bat, like that. I mean, it does go to show you Brandon Beane does get it pretty locked up if he wants it to be.
Yeah.
Depending on who the player is, like sometimes the player wants the information out there. But I mean, I was surprised. Like I wasn't surprised at the player. I wasn't surprised at the position. I wasn't surprised at how big of a swing it was. I was just surprised because nobody had talked about it. I mean, he was released on March 6th, so I mean, you and I personally wouldn't have even had a chance to talk about him based on our recording schedule, right? And so, I mean, it was a surprise, but not like I wasn't floored or anything. I just started writing. Like I was on the computer doing. We were watching like the Love Is Blind finale reunion thing, my wife and and I was doing like budget stuff on the computer. So I was already here. So I just started typing it. It was fun.
Literally like 2 minutes before the signing, I was on my Facebook and you could click memories. So I was going through my memories. I was like, okay. I remember this. And I realized it was 5 years ago, literally yesterday into today, where COVID just wrecked shit. The NBA shut down, everything started shutting down. Like pretty much as you and I are talking, like about 5 years ago today, the world just completely
Yep.
changed now, then forever. And I don't want to talk about that today. It was just wild. And then like I said, I go on Twitter. I was like, holy shit, man. So the Bills, and you're right, he did just get released on March 6th, but it was kind of rumored that he was going to be getting cut for a while. And also part of the reason I didn't really spend much attention or time thinking about him was because we were already hearing about Frisco. He was going to go play with his brother in Frisco, or he was going to go to Miami, which by the way, both those teams reportedly did make offers to Joe Bosa as well. Frisco around 10, Miami was in allegedly a little bit under 8. Anyway, so the Bills have signed now 3 defensive linemen: Bosa, Larry Ogunjobi. I got to admit, it's going to take some practice to get that right effortlessly. and then Michael Hoyt. So the Bills have revamped this defensive line. I had a tweet, okay? Now, this was before Bosa signed, and I want to ask you a question here, and I didn't give you this before, so kind of putting you on the spot here. It's about Christmas. I'm a very underrated tweeter. I am an excellent, excellent tweeter. I put a tweet out about because they signed Josh Palmer and Michael Hoyt. That was day one, right? So let me read what I wrote. I said, Josh Palmer and Michael Hoyt are the socks and the pajamas underneath the Christmas tree. They don't excite you that much, but you also know you need them. Trey Hendrickson is the Atari 2600. I'm showing my age here. Buried on the far left underneath the tree that you've been asking mom and dad for since Labor Day. If Trey Hendrickson, going back to those days, I guess, or you could be more modern now. If Trey Hendrickson was the Atari 2600, what is Joe Bosa? What gift is Joe Bosa? He's not an Atari 2600. What is he? You open that up, you're like, what the hell gift is that?
Right. He's probably the first gift you would play with if it was like, the only gift that was under your tree. But I don't know if it's like the one that you're going to like spend your whole day doing, right? Like I remember I was really young. I don't even remember how old I was, but I mean, we were still having Christmas at my grandmother's, and we got the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles board game. Don't ask me to describe anything that happened in it. But we played that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle board game for most of that day at grandma's house, and like probably never played it again. So like maybe not the best thing for Joey Bosa, but like it's still something you get excited about. It's something that you really want to interact with, but like maybe it's not like the top of the line, $500 PS5 or whatever to update your Atari metaphor here.
That is really impressive on the fly, man. Really good job. Really good job. All right, so Bosa gets 1 year, like I said, 12.6 million, 12 of it guaranteed. Obviously, and I'm sure you've been doing your homework on him for SB Nation 2 since he signed before that. The injuries, it's all about the injuries. He's played just 28 games over the last 3 seasons, a couple stints on IR, and I was going back and looking at the injury history. I was looking it up. There's a lot of people, everybody knows at this point, if you're a casual Bills fan, the guy's been hurt. You keep hearing it. Can he stay healthy? That's the big key. In 2022, he had a grade 3 groin tear. He missed 12 games. In 2023, he had a grade 1 pedal foot sprain. I said this on the show yesterday. I don't even know what the hell a pedal foot sprain is. I never heard of that shit in my life. But it forced him to miss 7 games in 2023. This past year, he had a back pull, a hip bruise, so he missed a couple games. He also missed a couple games in 2020 with a concussion. And then he missed 9 games in 2018 with a pedal foot bruise. By the way, I'll ask you this because I didn't know what the hell that is. Have you ever heard of a pedal foot bruise? I don't even know what is that. I don't even know what the hell it is.
I have never heard of that, so now I have to look it up, I guess. But no,
it's causing them a lot of football.
Right. We talked about this with Matt Milano, right? Like when he got his leg broke in London, that wasn't a concern for me because it was like that one-off injury, the Eric Wood breaking his leg injury. He came back from it. It's probably not going to impact him. It's not like one of those things that necessarily saps quickness or long speed or anything like that. And it's not one of those consistent youth injuries that we talk about. But the injuries that you all described are like soft tissue injuries. They're things that you can re-aggravate. They're things that can slow you down, even if you do play through them. And so it does concern me that it's, stuff like that, the groin tear, it's muscle tears, it's things like that. It's not a one-off, like, my ACL popped and like, I'll get it repaired and I'll be good as new. Like, these are things that can linger throughout an entire career. It's a bruise of the pedal bone within the hoof. I don't know what that means either. Okay, whatever. It's like a heel bruise, I guess. I don't know.
It's causing them to miss a lot of football, man. 9 games in 2018 and 7 games in 2023. So I make light of it because I've never heard of it, but damn, that's
blood leaks from vessels in the foot into the tissues of the skin, muscles, and bones. This it sounds like a pretty bad bruise. Like that, I don't want that. Like a bruised heel, but like to the nth degree. I don't know. I am not a doctor. I'm sorry. I am doing all of this live on the air.
Well, I was just interested in learning at least a little bit of something about what it is. Funny comment I want to pull up on the screen for people watching on the video side live too. We were talking about gifts, and he said Bosa, the gift that will break after 2 weeks of playing with it.
I hope not.
That's a good one, man. That's freaking funny. So yeah, so we all know about the injury history. That's a little more specific of what it is. Last season with the Chargers, he was pretty decent. He played 14 games. He had 5 sacks. He was a Pro Bowler, but look, you and I know we ain't gonna put no stock in a Pro Bowl. He was an alternate too. We ain't putting no stock into that shit. But he played well late. Everything I've read said he played well. He came on late in the season too. And in their playoff loss against Houston, he had 6 pressures and a sack. So he played well in the playoffs. And the other thing about Bosa too is, it's easy to compare him to Von Miller. Bosa relies a lot more on strength as opposed to that quick first step and that speed. And Joey Bosa is pretty good against the run. Now, I know PFF, a lot of people hate PFF. I'm not the biggest fan of them either. I know a lot of at least their grades, the way they grade things, could be up for discussion. But he had the 16th best run defense grade of any edge out of 135 eligible. So he can play against the run too. And then the other thing, Matt, I think motivation should be a factor for him, right? And he's what, can he return like 30 years old? It's on a 1-year deal. This is maybe his best and maybe his last opportunity to really go and show out and be able to get to the market next year and go get that 3-year, $15 or $20 million a year deal with more guaranteed money that some of these other guys have gotten. What did you prefer that the Bills did with Bosa? Like if it were up to you, within reason, well, I think anything actually was within reason. So I'll retract that statement. But what would you have done to address this? Obviously, Bosa they zoned in on him. That was going to be their big piece. What would you have done?
Well, if those other reports of the other contracts are true, then like the Bills had to top some of those other places. In an ideal world, you could give him like kind of the same deal that Von Miller had last year with a lower base salary and like incentives for snaps, incentives for sacks, excuse me, and then like the per game roster bonuses that Brandon Beane loves to give out. So like kind of an incentive based contract. But if he has like more guaranteed money on the table from somebody else, there's no reason for him to take that incentive based contract. And so I think this deal is probably the right one for the Bills. There are incentives built into this one, don't get me wrong, but Von Miller had like mucho incentives built in, like $7 million worth of incentives, where here it's like, I think Ian Rappaport reported it was like $3 million worth of incentives, depending on, we don't have that information yet, like what it would take for him to get those incentives.
When a lot of these edge rushers, these bigger name edge rushers started going off the market, which of course it happened very quickly, we're starting to think that maybe the Bills were looking to bring back Von Miller, obviously at a much reduced rate. I was starting to think that at one point before, when they got to be Tuesday night, I'm looking at the market. I'm like, I don't know, man. It's just, is Vaughn going to be back?
For me, it was as soon as they actually released him, that was like the deadline for me, like, because that accelerates his dead cap into the current NFL season, or the NFL league year, I should say. And so accelerating the stuff from the future years, it would have risen, or it would have brought up his cap hit so much if they give him another $8 million. It would have been the exact same as if they just kept him on the roster before. So I always thought if Von Miller was coming back, it was like on a veteran minimum deal with incentives, just because they already absorbed that huge dead cap hit. It's not huge, but like that bigger dead cap hit, because they released him already. And so I thought once they actually filed that paperwork and he was actually released, that was going to be the point of no return for Von Miller. So I know other people were holding out hope. People were asking me about it. Like, he had already refused a pay cut in Buffalo. I would assume they offered him one last year and he took it. This year, I'm just going to assume they offered it to him again and he didn't take it. So once that happened, I think it was just, they were being cordial publicly, but I don't think it was ever a realistic option.
And by the way, so we're around 9:20 p.m. on Wednesday night right now, recording this. Radio silence to this point with Von Miller around the league. I haven't heard a thing about him connected to anybody, maybe, and it might be some time before you do. I had 2 guys. When it got to be Monday at noon or Monday at 11:59 a.m., there were 2 guys I really was locked into. One was the big ticket guy, Josh Sweat. I was convinced that he was absolutely worth the money. I listened to Lockdown Bills with Joe Marino all the time, and he really pounded the table for him and said, even if he's getting 20 to $23 million, that it was money that would be well worth it. So I was really locked in on him. And then the other guy, which is funny because he's the first signee of free agency this year, Hassan Reddick. You know, we
Mhm.
talked about it. He's been really good for a few years with Philly. He gets traded to the Jets. He wants a new deal. He don't get it. He sits out. He mails it in when he's finally does play near the end of the year. He does nothing for the Jets. I'm like, this guy's still got some talent. He can get after the quarterback. I'd love to see him. Literally a minute or so into free agency, he signs a 1 year, $14 million deal with $12 million guaranteed, and he goes to Tampa. So my that dream was gone about 45 seconds or so in the free agency for the Bills. But yeah, you end up with Joe Bosa. This is definitely going to be a wait and see. One last point about him before we move on to, you think it's a good fit for the Bills because in part, first of all, he's a need, but also Sean McDermott, the way he is married to having a rotation. Guys don't play 75% of the snaps for the Buffalo Bills here. That feels like a good fit, and it feels like it would be a little easier and natural to be able to manage, to have load management with Joe Bosa. For that reason, you feel like that's a good fit for the Bills too?
I remember it being an issue that Von Miller had to talk about when he was signed. It would have been something that was talked about if Miles Garrett was traded here, Max Crosby in particular, because that dude just plays like 90 something percent of snaps
Yeah.
sometimes. And so it would have been a point of conversation with some of those other dudes. Um, I think Joey Bosa plays like 60% of snaps on a normal basis, somewhere around there. If Even if he takes a back seat from that with the Bills, I think that would be totally normal for this stage in his career, especially with his injury history. So, yeah, I would agree with that 100%.
All right, but now let's talk about the next guy too before we get to break, which was
Sure.
signing today actually. Larry Ogunjobi, a 1 year, 8.5 million. I believe he's getting 8 million guaranteed.
Hmm.
So he's played for the last 3 years with Pittsburgh, man. One very good in Pittsburgh. When you go and you look at the numbers, not very good. And I heard from a lot of people who cover the Steelers that a major reason why is he just was not a good fit there. They play a 3-4 defense. He's better
Right.
built to be a 4-3 type tackle. Makes you wonder what Pittsburgh was thinking signing him to begin with. He's, by the way, a very high character player, if this means something, which it does to the Buffalo Bills. He was the Pittsburgh recipient of the Walter Payton Man of the Year award just this past season. So a very high character player. Now he played a year with Cincinnati, and I want to play a clip for everybody. If you don't know Joe Goodberry, Joe Goodberry is a really good content creator. He covers the Cincinnati Bengals, Bengals on the brain. He's been around for a long, long time. He's a great source of knowledge. And to be honest with you, I was talking to him earlier this week, but I wasn't talking about him. I was talking about Trey Hendrickson and what's the realistic possibility of a trade here? What's going on with Trey Hendrickson in Cincinnati? And that's what we were conversing about this week. But right after signing, I was literally reaching out to him, and he was kind enough to make me a quick like minute audio clip to kind of describe his takes on him. So let me pull this up. Let me play this and
Thinking
then we'll
about
get
it,
back
and we
to
were
it.
talking about Larry Ogunjobi for the Bengals on my show the other day. He is, and this was 3 years ago, he was with Cincinnati, but he is a home run or strikeout defensive tackle. Very good first step penetrator. Inconsistent first step. When it's on, he is a pain in the butt for blockers because he gets upfield so quickly. He will often leave his gap or leave his responsibility, and it can create issues. Have called him plenty of times a chaos creator. It's a good thing when you have a lot of good players around him because they will clean up the chaos. When the talent around him deteriorates, that chaos turns into running backs hitting his hole and no one being there and giving up a big play. So if you're looking at PFF grades or anything like that, they're never going to be good for Larry Ogunjobi because he has so many negative plays that balance out his positive plays as well. He's always been the same guy, though. Extremely inconsistent, but if you don't have a penetrator or a guy that, can get upfield, he's very valuable for you.
All right, that was Joe Goodberry there. Just describing him. First of all, what do you think about that clip? And by the way, I also thought When they first signed him, I'm like, well, all right, well, is this a Daquan Jones replacement? It's not. It's not. He's not a more. He could play one tech in a pinch, but he's more like that behind the Ed Oliver guy, probably in this defense. Or when there's surefire passing situations, like he'll come in there like Dewan Smoot did last year and play it probably. I would think a lot of those snaps. But what are your thoughts right now on this signing? Another guy who also got released. Now that I think about it, Bosa was released. I forgot about that till you said something, by the way, earlier in the show. Credit to you. This was also a release because I'm looking. I bitched about this on Twitter. I bitch about everything. I was looking at the Athletic, ESPN, CBS.com, NFL.com. You guys, he wasn't on the top 100 free agent list anywhere. I'm like, this guy can't
Right.
be. Well, that's because he wasn't a free agent until he was just recently released. But what are your thoughts on this signing for the Bills?
And so both Ogunjobi and Bosa won't count towards the comp pick formula because they were released from their team too. So that's
True.
another little thing right there.
Yeah, but they ain't losing nobody anyway.
Right. When I saw the money, I like I said, I thought he was a Daquan Jones replacement too, because that's starter money. It's good defensive tackle money. And then I got to thinking, and like, you remember a few years ago when the Bills signed Jordan Phillips to a $5 million deal to like come in and be like that 50-50 guy with Ed Oliver and just like to solidify the defensive tackle rotation. So like I can see a situation where Ogunjobi and Ed Oliver are both on the field at the same time. Oliver kicks over to one tech, and they're trying to do the penetration thing. So the Bills have done this before, really investing in the defensive line. Obviously, we know how much they've invested in the defensive line, but I wanted to bring up that Jordan Phillips thing specifically because they've literally done like the kind of medium-ish big money type for that rotation. And so when Brandon Beane wants to make a point, as he's clearly done this offseason onto the defensive line, they're going to throw money at it. They're probably going to keep throwing picks at it too in the NFL draft. Like he's serious about improving this defensive line. And I think this signing shows that.
Yeah, another wait and see. Again, he's not young. Yeah, he's not washed up
Right.
either. But we'll have to see how it plays out. That's where I'm at with him. And I do like that they're like you said. You got to throw some darts at the board. You want to hit the board, you got to keep throwing the darts. So I got that. And then quickly before we get to a break here, Michael Hoyt, who they signed on day one. I think the contract details ended up being 3 for 21 with like about a little over 14 guaranteed. Versatile guy, can move around a lot. I hear him described as a chess piece. By the way, let me say this. A great chess piece, a freak athlete. I've heard those descriptions a lot. Look, I'm not saying he's not a good athlete. I'm not saying he can't play multiple positions. But let's chill on the hyperbole a little bit. The Rams could have carried. Why did get the free agency? Why didn't you know what I'm saying? It's not like the Rams were in cap hell and they had this other tough decision. They just decided to let him go get banked. That don't mean he won't be great with the Buffalo Bills. I'm just saying, let's just chill when it comes to that. He's played a lot over the last 2 years. 57% of the snaps this past year with the Rams, 85% of the snaps in 2023. So he's a horse. He's been on the field a lot. And I'll say this too. A lot of Bills fans and especially or content creators too that are very pro Buffalo, no matter what it is that they do, they kind of a player will sign and like, oh, what a great deal, and blah, blah, blah. Cover One, I'm going to give the boys at Cover One some credit here because they were in on this guy well before the Bills signed him. I looked it up. Eric Turner had some really good film, spoke very high of him. So this was a guy, I think he was number 2 on Eric's like target list of like realistic free agents that were good fits. And Anthony Nebraska from Cover One too. He was like 4th on his list. So those guys, the guys who watched the film and analyze this stuff were very, very high on him. My thought was, boy, I hope this doesn't end up being the biggest addition to the defensive line in free agency, which it wasn't because they came back and signed 2 guys since then. But your thoughts on him? It does feel like a nice little versatile, maybe, am I correct in saying a Dwayne Smoot type of player?
A lot of us old Bills fans are trying to liken him to like Lorenzo Alexander, a guy that can stand up and do some coverage in some space. A guy that can put his hand in the dirt, go after the quarterback. I think he's probably going to end up playing more defensive end than anything else. The incentives built in his contract I believe are sack incentives, and so or at least likely sack incentives. So yeah, it would appear that he's going to be playing that defensive end rushing the passer thing. But yeah, being able to have multiple looks on the defensive line is something the Bills haven't had a great track record of doing under Sean McDermott. Like they kind of like lining up and doing what they want to do or trying to do what they want to do. So it'll be interesting to see how he fits in. And like not for nothing, the dude's from Ontario. He knows how to play in the cold. Like I mean, he's not unwilling to have that conversation about getting into it on the defensive line.
He was excited too on social
Yeah.
media. I saw his Twitter, and he was incredibly excited to come to Bills Mafia, and that felt genuine. It is close enough to home for him. The LA Chargers, as we go to break here, they're signing Mike Williams back, a 1-year deal worth up to $6 million. Very, very interesting. All right, let's take a real quick break. On the video side, we'll be back in like 5 seconds, and we'll continue to talk about the defense, and then I want to flip over and talk about the offense and a very interesting thing going on with the Bills at one of their positions. I don't know what the hell's going on with corner. We'll talk about that too right after this break. All right, I am back here with Matt Warren from SB Nation, and we are going over some of the Bills' biggest moves right now. 3 days into free agency, this roster is really starting to take shape. Almost feels like maybe you get an ad or two, low-key ad or two, and see at the draft. I want to pull up something. We should have talked about this earlier. I actually forgot about it. Credit to my guy Ranger here who's in the chat. Leonard Floyd would have been nice. He lasted a whole hour in free agency. I did. You know what? He dominated Bills content for about an hour or two in free agency because the 49ers cut him. I started doing some homework on him. I was looking up his stats, his sacks, and game log production and things like that. And before I really got a chance, I figured that would be something I would talk about on last night's show. But then he signed with Atlanta, got a pretty good deal, a 1-year deal with Atlanta too, got a $10 million deal. And then, of course, the Bills signed Bosa later at night. So it all went null and void. But a pretty good point. Look, so here it is now. They add 3 guys to the defensive line rotation. They're all making the team. Right now, so you got Greg Rizzo, Ed Oliver, Quan Jones, Bosa, Epinesa, Michael Hoyt, Ogunjobi. I guess it's going to take me a while to get that right. Dwayne Carter, Javon Sullivan. I just named off 9 guys right now on the Bills' defensive line. 9, I don't want to necessarily prominent, but 9 guys who you expect to be on this football team this year, and the draft hasn't happened yet. And with Bosa on a 1-year deal, with multiple guys having 1-year deals, AJ Epinesa on the final year of his deal, DeQuan Jones on the final year of his deal, they're going to draft defensive linemen, at least one, maybe more, and it could come very early. So it could be a prominent guy. You look at that 9, I'm not sure that all 9 of those guys are going to be on the Buffalo Bills that I just ran off come week 1 of the regular season. You agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that. Not to mention the numbers game, well, the roster numbers game, but there's the salary game with it too. Not salary cap necessarily, but they got 4 guys making $8 million or more, 5 guys making $7 million or more, and 6 guys making $6 million or more. That's a lot of change on the defensive line. And I know they wanted to like put a lot of investment into that defensive line, but I also think they're going to draft a 1-tech defensive tackle at some point, in like that day 2, day 3 range that like, could make a significant impact. So it really does feel like they're going to be moving 1 or 2 of those guys off of the roster that you just mentioned in, well, whether it's before the draft or even all the way into like, August, September, you could see that happen.
My first thought is DeQuan Jones. DeQuan Jones has felt like the most sensible one. Then I'm like, hold on, I just named you 9 guys. How many of those guys play 1-tech? That's it, right?
Ed Oliver can moonlight there, but he can't play that over the course of a season. Like,
no, they're not big enough as it is up front. I feel like sometimes, you know what I mean? And so I'm all for it. I've said this. I love DeQuan Jones, man. I pounded the table for him last year. I thought he was a stud. I think that injury to his pec really changed the trajectory of his Bills career. It's unfortunate. Now he's just a guy out there. It's how I feel. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but I'm just being honest, in my assessment of him. But even if you draft a rookie, let's just say they take a one tech at pick 30. You better have a hell of a lot of confidence in a rookie to be your starter from day one and not have anything really proven behind him to be able to get rid of Daquan.
Yeah, but they don't owe Daquan Jones any money or guaranteed stuff until the season starts. And so they can keep both of those guys on the roster through training camp and the preseason to see kind of how that rookie acclimates and then pull that trigger. I think the one that, if you're going to see one coming up real soon here, I think AJ Epinesa is the guy that like is looking around right now being like on some thin ice. Not that he's played poorly, like I don't think he has, but with the guys that they've added, he kind of becomes superfluous for this Bills team this year. And like you said, he's going to be a free agent a year from now. Like, I'm not worried about him with the comp pick necessarily, especially if you can get like a fifth round pick for him now or a fourth round pick for him now. If like we get really bonkers up in here, I don't know, but so you can get some trade value for him. He's the guy that if it happens in the next month before the NFL draft, it's going to be him. And if it doesn't happen until after the draft, I keep looking at Daquan because I think they're going to draft a one tech. So
yeah, and look, and by the way, if it comes down to Brandon Beane decide he wants to try to trade AJ Vanessa, he doesn't necessarily have to wait to draft day. We saw it today that he will make a trade at any point. I will point out too, I named 9 guys that they can have 10 defensive linemen on their roster. I mean, so it's not out of the realm that they keep all 9, they draft one guy, and there's your 10. But I expect them to draft more than one defensive lineman. They still may sign another defensive lineman. I'm still holding out hope that they do something that for me is an improvement over the one tech with Daquan Jones from what I've seen last year. And maybe that comes via the draft. They could go that way, the draft. Also corner, which we'll get to in a second. I want to get your thoughts. I feel like if you know me, if you listen to the show, you follow me on Twitter, I feel like you know where I'm going to go with this. But I ain't going to lie. Very surprising news to me, and probably to a lot of people too. Very mixed reaction too. Very heated mixed reaction. Damar Hamlin re-signs with the Buffalo Bills 1 year. As we're recording this, the contract details, the financials have not been reported, but I don't think it's for a lot of money. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, regardless of the money, Damar Hamlin ends up re-signing for the Buffalo Bills. What are your thoughts?
The fact that the number hasn't been announced means it's probably pretty low. We just got the number for what's his name, the other guy. Why can't I remember his name?
Darrick Forrest.
Yeah, and that was low. It's like 1.2 million, so like NFL minimum, just plus a signing bonus, a small signing bonus. So it's like a really small number. It would not surprise me at all if Hamlin's number was like that. I've been comparing him to Cam Lewis for a long time, right? Like he's a guy that's like he lifts your floor, and he can come in and give you like this kind of baseline type of performance. He knows the system. Sean McDermott obviously likes those kind of guys, and so especially with how little money it's going to cost, like this is a win for everybody in my opinion. But I know you had said previously that you don't even want him on the roster to tempt Sean McDermott, and so I can at least understand that part. But for me, like having a guy that can start for you in a pinch is just a recipe like for what I want them to do at cornerback. And so they can go into the draft and then pick the best player available when that time comes so that like they can elevate their roster as opposed to plug a hole. And so I'm definitely okay with them bringing back Damar Hamlin. Some people are like, it's a charity signing. Hell no. Like if he wasn't one of the 4 best safeties last year, he wouldn't have been on the roster. And even them signing him now doesn't mean he's going to be on the roster in a month or, in August. So I'm totally fine with this.
I'll say this. There's 3 things that have really surprised me this week with free agency in regards to the Bills. 2 of them we already hit on. 1, Matt Collins not re-signing with the Bills really surprised me. I'll get your thoughts on that in a few too. That's 1. Joey Bosa obviously really surprised me. And Damar Hamlin coming back really surprises me. And I'll say this. One thing is obvious, okay? The guy went out, and I saw like a week before free agency, maybe 2 weeks before free agency, hired new agents. I saw it on Twitter. I think Adam Schefter tweeted it out. He had an agency. I'm like, all right, he's going to go get some money somewhere. Good for him. I don't dislike Damar Hamlin. I want to be real clear. Aaron Rodgers is a piece of shit scumbag. I don't like Aaron Rodgers. I think he's a rotten, horrible human
Okay.
being. Okay, so the shit that I say about Aaron Rodgers on Twitter is personal. I don't like him. I got no ill will or problem with Damar Hamlin as a human being whatsoever. I like him. He's a hero in a lot of ways, okay?
Yeah.
No issues with him on a personal level. I just do not think he's a very good football player. That's just my
Mhm.
personal opinion. Anyway, I thought he was gone. Somebody was going to give him a contract. He gets an agent. The fact that he came back to the Bills on Wednesday on a 1-year deal, that tells me ain't no market out there for him. No Philly, no Pittsburgh, which I thought both of those teams could have been in
Mhm,
play.
mhm.
Some other team, whether it's as a starter or a valuable backup, because everyone says at worst he's a valuable backup. Well, I feel like some of these teams with a lot more cap money maybe would have offered us some more money, said, hey, come be our 3 safety or whatever. They did it. He's back here on a 1-year deal. That tells me there was no market for him. And again, I like him as a person. I don't think he's a good enough athlete at times. Okay. And he could get
Yeah.
exposed. And you saw it in Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game. And I'm not putting that loss on him. I'm putting that loss on like 9 guys on defense. But he was one of them that really stuck out like a sore thumb. But it's wait. Damar Hamlin cannot start over Cole Bishop. If Cole Bishop's not the answer, and maybe he's not, and I'm not confident that he is the answer, but if Cole Bishop's not the answer, neither is Damar Hamlin. That's where I'm getting at.
Mhm.
I don't want to see a Bills defense in 2025 that features Damar Hamlin as a healthy starter because he's one of the best 2 safeties on this roster. It's not good enough. I lost my shit when Justin Reed signed with the Saints because I was
Oh,
low key like, really, what a great addition he would have been to a Bills secondary. And we end up with Damar Hamlin. So go Cole Bishop. You better be the shit. You better be good.
it
And then
doesn't stop them from signing an upgrade at safety. And so like that, just keep, we're going to keep saying that over and over again. So Damar Hamlin signing doesn't stop them from adding a superior safety.
well, they did add another safety too, Darrick Forrest. You
Yeah.
mentioned him from Washington. And I'll tell you, I went in research mode because I didn't know really. I've heard of him. I knew who he was, but I really don't know anything about it. I wasn't familiar with his game. 17 starts in 40 games,
Mhm.
and he was really good in 2022 with Washington. He had 88 tackles, 4 picks, 2 forced fumbles or 2 forced fumbles and a fumble recovery. And then in 2023, he hurt his shoulder. He only played 5 games in 2023. And then this past year, Washington brought a new staff in, and they signed Jeremy Chin, and they went in a different direction. It was Jeremy Chin and Quan Martin. So he was the odd guy out. He's a good special teams player, too. He's played like 150 some special team snaps last year. Based on what I'm hearing from people who cover Washington, fans of Washington, this may be a low key, really good signing. I look at him as worst case, an upgrade over, say, Kareem Jackson was the 4th safety for the Bills last year. Maybe he challenges Damar Hamlin for that 3rd safety spot. I like this
It,
move.
re- it reminds me a little bit of what they did with Taylor Rapp. He had starting experience with the Rams, came to Buffalo to be that 3rd safety, maybe it was even 4th safety behind Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, who were getting up there in age. We knew they were going to get nicked up and need a guy that could step in and play when they needed like snaps from somebody who was capable of starting, so replacement level starter. And it just reminds me of that like kind of 1-year deal, less than $2 million, like just like kind of be our backstop. Again, I keep saying raise the floor, and that's what they're doing with guys like this.
Yeah, look, am I being too hard on Damar Hamlin? Am I being, even though I say it's not personal, I like him. Is it feeling personal listening to me
Well,
kind of
if you're
rant on him?
expecting, I mean, if you're expecting him to be a high end starter and he's not that, like that's not his fault. That's your expectation. I know Bruce Nolan would say that like 100% of the time, right? Like it's about what your expectation is versus what the reality is for him. And if, like like I say, if he's your top backup safety that has a lot of starting experience and can step in when there's an injury, like that's good for a guy like him. If you expect him to be your starting safety, that's like top half of the league in terms of safeties, he's not going to be that. So what's your expectation? And then how does he fit into it?
Just too slow. He's just too slow, man. He's just
Yeah.
too slow. And I'll be honest with you too. I'm not gonna lie to anybody. I like Damar Hamlin as said as a person. Not a big fan of Father Hamlin, the way he came at me and,
Well,
some of the shit he says. You can't I don't wanna relive that, but yeah, I'm not gonna say that it hasn't left a bad seed in me, when it comes to that shit, but anyway, look, I hope for the best for Damar Hamlin. If he's gotta play, I hope he's good. I'm not gonna not root for him, you know what I mean?
right.
I really this really amps up the pressure for me on Cole Bishop working out and being good.
Hmm.
Because I truly believe, first of all, I guarantee you, you're going to hear Sean McDermott talking about how he loves competition. He is not going to anoint Cole Bishop the starter now
Nope.
in April, May, June, or July. Cole Bishop's going to have to go out. It's going to be a competition just like it was last year. And may the best man win. I just get nervous that a tie is going to go to Damar Hamlin. That's all I'm saying. A tie could go to Damar. But if the best Cole Bishop could do is be a tie with Damar Hamlin, then Cole Bishop was a lousy second round
Yes.
pick.
Mhm.
Straight up. Speaking of lousy picks, the Bills got rid of one on
Yeah.
Wednesday via a trade. All right, so when it comes to cornerback, Matt, I'm like, I keep sitting and waiting. This was a position where, and you and I had a really good conversation about this just last week. Maybe the Bills strike out with the defensive line and don't get any big name guys. And maybe instead they really decide, hey, we're going to solidify our secondary. We're going to go get a stud corner to play next to our already stud corner, Christian
Mhm.
Benford. I don't know how you pay them both, but whatever. We'll figure that out. So all these big names that were going off the board early, I'm like, oh, that's not Buffalo. That's not Buffalo. Then there's still a lot of names. I'm like, nothing is going on. The Bills, as we're recording this, still do not have a CB2. Right now, technically, it's Jamarcus Ingram. Well, it's not going to be Kyrie Elam because, again, out of the clear blue on Wednesday afternoon, he gets traded to the Dallas Cowboys. Kyrie Elam in a sixth for a fifth this year and a seventh next year. The Bills saved, and this might be the most impressive thing. They saved 2.57 million in salary cap space by trading him instead of cutting him, which I think would have happened in August. And if you look at the draft slots, they moved up 34 spots from 6 to 5, and they also picked up the 7th with the cap space. And if they would have cut him, like say in August, it would have cost them 4.3 million. So this is a really good move. It sucks that Kyrie Elam was a bust in Buffalo. Hopefully he won't be in Dallas, but this was a low key, really strong move by Brandon Beane here.
Oh yeah, I there was no way I thought he was going to get anything for him other than like a pick swap. So getting just an additional pick in general was surprising to me. I clearing the 2.57 million is like really impressive because he as a first rounder his money was already guaranteed. It was locked in. So if they cut him, he's
Yep.
getting all that money from the Bills anyway because nobody was going to pay him more than that. So it's like the Brandon Bean, like where the sunglasses come on. Like it's like the meme personified, right? It was. I was very impressed with what I saw. I just could not believe they got so much for him in return.
I'll say this too. I'm impressed with the trade. I like Kyrie again. Kyrie Elam, maybe he'll go
Yeah.
on to do something in Dallas. It was not going to happen in Buffalo. His confidence was ruined. Sean McDermott had no confidence in him. He had one last opportunity against Washington against Kansas City, and it was just an unmitigated, complete disaster. That was the end of
Yeah.
the road for him right then and
Oh
there.
yeah.
What is going on with the Bill? This is now, if there's one mystery on this football team right now, literally, if there's one, besides maybe who's going to be the punter,
Well,
who's going to be the other corner right now? Because again, most of these names are gone. There's not a lot left. For me, I'm looking at two people, which means they'll sign somebody that no one sees coming because that's just what keeps happening with the Buffalo Bills. We spent all this time talking about the same guys, and then they go pull the trigger on somebody no one sees coming. But right now, it feels like Russell Douglas is still out there. And more
mhm.
and more and more, I'm like, hey, man, I'm good with another year of Russell. Give me a rookie. And then there's Asante Samuel Jr. He's been talked about a lot by content creators, media, Bills fans. He's still out there. He was injured. Kind of reminds me of Bosa in a way.
Yeah.
Injuries, some skill set. Like he's not a good tackler, but he's a man. Oh man, he could be a great playmaker. Bruce Nolan's a big fan of his. Where are you at with corner right now in what they're doing? Because most of these guys, these impactful corners, are gone.
It was, I mean, I've been tweeting about it all day. It's the number one thing that the Bills need. And they don't need a punter. They have a punter that has starting experience in the NFL, quote unquote, starting experience for a punter
Sure. They're gonna
on their
draft
roster. So,
him.
like, they could even field like a team right now. But, like, I don't know if I want Jamarcus Ingram. And then, like, I don't even know who the next boundary cornerback would be behind Jamarcus Ingram. So, like, yeah, they're going to sign somebody. They're going to raise the floor, as we keep saying. So it's a Dane Jackson or Levi Wallace that raises it a little bit over Jamarcus Ingram. Like you're talking about a Kendall Fuller or Asante Samuel Jr. or Russell Douglas. Like you can keep raising that floor. I do fully expect them to draft a cornerback in one of the first 2 or 3 rounds in the draft too, just because like you want to have like once Benford gets his big money, you want a cheaper guy underneath him to kind of like develop like you did with Benford, or ideally you would have done with Elam. But so that's more roster building thing, but like they do need to plug that hole in free agency. And I mean, there's options out there. There's options that Bills fans like, and then there's options Bills fans don't like, but there's starting caliber options out there.
Mac Jones just signs a contract with the San Francisco
Uh-huh.
49ers. Defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson. Heard him, some fans talking to him in regards to the Bills. He just signed with, who was it, Arizona? Yeah, he's going to Arizona. Nice haul between him and Josh Sweat, both going to the Arizona Cardinals. Yeah, look, when it comes to corner, I feel like this. They're a corner away. They're a Rasul Douglas away or Samuel away from going into this draft and saying, I quite literally could go just draft the best
Uh-huh.
player available. Right now, if the NFL draft was tomorrow, I feel like they'd be in a situation where they were in 2022. I kind of felt like they had to go get a corner, and they did, and it was the wrong one in Kyrie Elam. I feel like right now, as things stand, they would have to go get a corner with their first pick right now. So if they could go get a floor guy, like you mentioned, maybe don't have to be pick 30 anymore. Somebody who's going to come in and probably start. As things stand right now, any rookie they drafted, you'd have to expect him to come in and be a starter. Definitely the biggest mystery right now on this team. And I'll tell you, it's different, Matt. You and I talk every week. 50 plus minutes into a podcast here, we haven't mentioned the name Josh Allen, and we haven't even really talked about the Bills' offense. It's all
Right.
about the defense because free agency, with the exception of a player, has been all about revamping this defense. And they got a lot of tools. Now, do they work? We'll find out in time. Offensively, I'm not going to talk about him because I already did on the show earlier this week, but Josh Palmer was the wide receiver ad that they went with. Again, no Matt Collins, no Amari Cooper. He's another one who's been radio silent. I have not heard him linked anywhere right now. Josh Palmer, a good man coverage beater, some really good metrics with stats in terms of separation, things like that. Separation score, I should say. What are your thoughts on him? Are you happy with that move? That was one I know Joe Marino and a couple other people were kind of pounding the table for, and I was pretty happy about that too. That might be my favorite move actually so far of the Bills offseason.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit here and be like, he's got so much untapped potential that he could explode in this offense or anything like that. But he's a guy that can stretch the field vertically. He can separate. It's literally what we've talked about them needing this whole time. And so if he can keep putting up the same stats that he's been doing, you might think that might be like a little underperforming. But if he's putting up those stats, that means Khalil Shakir's probably open underneath, and Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox and like Keon Coleman have more opportunities as well. So I mean, I'm even okay with him just continuing the stats that he has in that role as that other boundary receiver.
My favorite metric with him came from Fantasy Points data, and they had Palmer as the 8th best in the NFL at separation score rank. And by comparison, if you want to know how bad the Bills struggle with separation score,
It's bad.
Keon Coleman was 54th. Mac Hollins was 71st. Shakir was 82nd, surprisingly. Dalton Kincaid was 86th, and Palmer was 8th. So that tells you that he brings a skill set. And Carl Jones from Channel 4, I read it. I said on the air a couple days ago, say it again. had a great tweet about the wide receiver room. He goes, think of wide receiver rooms like a basketball lineup. You should strive for varying body types and skill sets. The Bills have their big man in Keon. They got their two guards, Shakir and Samuel, and they desperately need a wing who can do a little bit of everything. Hopefully, Josh Palmer could be that guy. Do you feel like right now this wide receiver room is pretty much set? Because, look, they got 4 guys right now, and if they carry 5, none of those 4 guys play special teams. Are you going to go sign a 5th guy with 0 special teams value? Do you know a lot of teams that got 5 receivers where none of them play special teams?
Right. The Mac Hollins role, right? Like you need a guy that's going to come in. Maybe he can contribute on offense sometimes when you need him to, but really he's here for special teams. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. It would surprise me if they drafted like a guy in the first round and like now they've got all these guys that don't play special teams. That would surprise me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think the key to the Bills passing game, I think they're thinking, and I agree with it, it's not going to be adding another big name. Maybe they bring back Amari Cooper. By the way, do you think Amari Cooper is still playing for the Bills, or do you think they're moving on from him?
I would never rule it out. But like we just said, if he's not playing special teams, now you've got 4 guys at the top of the depth chart that don't play special teams, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know, man. I mean, special teams is changing, but still having 5 receivers. Now you could keep 6 receivers on your team. You're going to have a special teams ace be that 6th wide receiver. Maybe you keep 1 less defensive lineman or something like that. So, I mean, it's not, set in stone thing that the Bills wouldn't sign another receiver who doesn't play special teams. It just feels a little bit unlikely. I think Amari Cooper, I feel like they're just like with Rasul Douglas. I think there might be some interest, but I think they're like monitoring the market right now. Those guys are probably going out trying to get more money. And if it's not there, the Bills have an offer for X amount of dollars. And hey, if it don't work out, come back here. I could see that with Amari Cooper. I wouldn't be against having Amari Cooper. But I think when it comes to the Bills passing game, more than now that they got Palmer, more than going to get a Keenan Allen or some people are Stephon Diggs, which ain't happening. I'm just saying a guy like that, I think it's more about the key is going to be Keon Coleman and Dalton Kincaid just stepping up this year.
Yeah,
being better.
I agree.
Being better than what they were last year. Because Shakir, you know what he could do. Samuel showed some things. You got Palmer. And if you get a better version of Keon Coleman and a better version of Dalton Kincaid, that's where I think the offense that was historically good last year remains sustainable, even without going out and getting a big name. Before we get out of here, too, Ty Johnson, he's back. 2-year deal, $5 million. The Bills are quite literally running it back at running back. Your thoughts on him coming back, your thoughts on the running back room, and your thoughts on if him coming back affects anything with James Cook, which is surely a subplot of all this.
Yeah, it was interesting because Josh Allen today was asked about bringing back Ty Johnson and Reggie Gilliam. And he talked about Reggie Gilliam a lot, but didn't really mention Ty Johnson, which I just like one of those things that I find interesting. It's going to depend. The James Cook part of this conversation is like if we knew that if they didn't re-sign Ty Johnson, that they were going to like kind of sort of turn over that role to James Cook so that he could hopefully earn like a nice big contract. Them bringing him back doesn't stop that from happening, but it certainly puts a roadblock in. And so we'll have to see what the snap counts are. It's right. Is James Cook still not playing on third downs because Ty Johnson is in there? If that's still the case, like I don't. We've said this before. I don't think you could pay James Cook $15 million a season when he doesn't play third downs. That's just kind of where it's at right now. We talked about all the Bills free agents, and I kept saying, yeah, I'd re-sign them, and that's pretty much what the Bills did on offense outside of Mac Hollins.
I think the running game and the way they deploy the running backs is going for the most part be the same. They do what they do. I don't think things are going to be dramatically different with James Cook. And I really wish people would stop, and not that everyone does, but some do, stop talking about James Cook and how valuable he is based on how often he's on the field or how many rushing yards he has. Think about how much better they are when he's on the field, what he does on the field, his knack for finding the end zone, that touchdown he scored in Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game. He's a great player. I don't need him to play 65, 70% of the snaps. Maybe I do if I'm looking to pay him $15 million a year. We'll talk about in future weeks, like the running room and how we think it'll work. But let me ask you this one question. let's just say that between now and right before their season starts, okay? The Bills don't do anything at running back. They got their guy. Again, I forgot about shame on me for not mentioning Reggie Gilliam, by the way. What the hell? And Darrington Evans is back for like the 10,000th time as well. Let's just say those the top 3 running backs, and that don't change. And James Cook's contract situation, nothing gets done about it. They're like, we're just gonna let it ride here. He's not going to get a renegotiated contract. He doesn't get a raise for this year, which, by the way, I do think that will happen. I think he will get a raise for this year. But let's just say he don't. Okay. And he's going to play this year at 5 point whatever million and be scheduled to be a free agent after the season. And we get to summer, we get to training camp, late in the camp. Are you foreseeing a problem with James Cook right now? Or is he just being whatever he's doing on social media at this time? Do you see this being a problem if nothing gets done, especially now that Ty Johnson's back and he's not going to get 75% of the snaps?
It wouldn't surprise me at all if James Cook didn't practice at all at St. John Fisher, if he didn't play in any of the preseason games. I don't think he's going to miss a regular season game check. So it'll have more to do with like having to ramp him up in September as opposed to ramping him up in the preseason. So I do think that it's going to be an issue, but I don't think it's going to be a huge issue.
All right. Chooch says Daquan Hardy's straight trash. I heard the people bought him since training camp last year as a punt returner. Well, they traded for Brandon Condrington, and Hardy is more of a returner than a great defensive back. It's not that he's trash. I don't think he's straight trash. Cam Lewis plays that role, though. You know what I mean? That backup slot corner guy. So, yeah, I don't think it's anything against him NFL-wise. All right, so pretty much this is where we're at with the Buffalo Bills right now. I think they're going to add a corner. They might add some more pieces, some depth pieces, but I think we've seen the splash when it comes to the Bills, unless they surprise us at corner or receiver, which still could happen. And then we'll see how the draft plays out. But like, around the league right now, do you have any specific like takeaways around the league, like a big winner, or a big loser, or there's a player, a team, something that's, you looked at it like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I'm going to do the negative stuff first. I have no idea what the Seattle Seahawks are doing. But I got to at least respect it, right? Like Sean McDermott came in, went to the playoffs with Tyrod Taylor and that Bills team, then completely stripped it down the next year and rebuilt it. So Mike McDonald has seen this work before. He doesn't think Geno's the guy to take them to the promised land, trade him for a 3rd rounder, kind of like the Bills did with Tyrod Taylor, and build it back up. I mean, I guess he's doing it with Sam Darnold instead of drafting, Josh Allen. But those might be a little bit different. But so I kind of admire what they're doing, but they don't like their top 2 receivers are gone now. Geno Smith's gone. Like it's a cojones time in Seattle. And speaking of Seattle, like Russell Wilson, man, him being like the fallback plan for people that don't get Aaron Rodgers is like, I thought that dude in December was going to sign like a $40 million contract. Like I thought he was going to sign the Sam Darnold contract, and he just fell apart over the last few weeks. And just he's behind Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers has sucked. So I mean, it's just poor guy. The Titans are in like the same kind of boat too. They need to overpay for free agents because they've been so terrible. They don't have a quarterback and they don't have a direction, and their head coach is probably on a really short leash. Like it's going to be hard for them to do anything with the way their thing is structured right now. And then CJ Stroud, I think, has been a loser in free agency as well, just because the Texans have kind of gutted his offensive line.
Yeah.
They traded for Christian Kirk, but if the dude like doesn't have an offensive line in front of him, I don't know how he's going to get it to them. So those are like the guys that I'm down on. The guys that I'm up on, I really like what the Bears are doing with their offensive line. Kind of the opposite of the CJ Stroud to help out Caleb Williams. The Vikings defensive line overhaul, very, very good. I like what they're doing and how they're spending. And then I think the Buffalo Bills have had a great, let's expand it to like the re-signings that they had before, the Josh Allen extension, all the stuff that they've done over the last 7 days. Let's even include Khalil Shakir back in February. I think what the Bills have done is just masterful. And I mean, I've always been a Brandon Beane supporter that hasn't wavered. And despite the fact that we've had a couple little iffy second round picks and first round picks in there, and he got rid of Kyrie Elam because he was a bust. Like, I still very much support what Brandon Beane's doing, so I'm putting the Bills on my positive list.
I share what you say about Sam Darnold. It's kind of weird to me what Seattle is doing. I'm a little surprised Sam Darnold went there. He's going to get killed. The line's terrible. He's just I don't know. He turns his career around. He sheds that bust label. He really put it together. I just feel like Seattle was not the right fit. At the same token, who the hell are you and I to tell somebody to go now take a 3-year, $100 million contract,
Sure.
man? You know what? You could sack me 8 times a game and call me a bust. I'll take my $100 million for 3 years for sure. I'm with you on the Bills, man. I don't think it's a quote unquote homer take to really be happy with what the Bills. And I'm glad you talked about before free agency as well, because that matters a lot. The Bills locked up 3 very good players on 4-year extensions. If you've noticed this, this was pointed out to me. I didn't notice it on my own. I'm not smart enough. There's no 4-year contracts going on in free agency, like barely any. I Sweat got one. There's barely any though, man. Almost every contract is 3 years or less. And he gave 4-year extensions to 3 prominent players, and they got Josh Allen's contract done before free agency even started, man. That's impressive when you couple that.
You saw that.
What?
I was going to say, you saw that with a lot of teams locking up their own free agents over the weekend because they looked at this free agent class and there was just not a lot of super interesting players. Once T. Higgins, I mean, he was the one that a lot of people were looking at. Once he got tagged, then like there just wasn't a lot of like super helpful players. There's a bunch of old wide receivers you might want to give a 1-year contract to. There's maybe some of the pass rushers really excited you, but Myles Garrett got shut down and Max Crosby got shut down and Trey Hendrickson's still out there, I guess, able to be traded for. But like it felt like this free agent class wasn't going to be great. The NFL draft class, especially at quarterback, is going to be a little bit iffy at certain sexy positions. And so like it just feels like, well, I guess we'll go with this guy that we already have in the building. We know everything about him, as opposed to trying to sign an overachieving free agent or draft an overachieving player.
Yeah, for sure. And look, when it comes to the Bills, like I said, they have addressed, with the exception of corner, they've addressed needs. They needed a wide receiver who's better at getting open, who has speed, who get down the field. And they got that directly with Josh Palmer. They needed a change at the defensive line. And who knows if it's going to work out, but they certainly have instilled change there now with 3 guys. And if you count the draft, it's going to end up being more for sure. Mystery team, the Bengals. Like, what? There's no news about Chase, no news about Higgins. Trey Hendrickson is still out there. Where the hell does he end up? Do they end up just keeping him? Do they give him a new deal? If I'm a Bengals fan, I am living in some serious uncertain times right now. Very, very surprising.
And they haven't restructured their contracts, their big contracts either. So they're leaving salary cap space on the table for this season. So if you're trying to compete with the Ravens who are doing that, if you're trying to compete with the Chiefs who are doing that, and the Bills, like they're loading up again and again and again to take another bite at the apple. And the Bengals are like, nah, we're good. They signed Cody Ford. No, I'm just joking. But the BJ Hill is like their lone one. Then like they franchised T. Higgins, and that's about it. That's what Mike Gesicki, I guess, was a big signing for them, but a re-signing. So
quick little side note, because again, I've had my corner of my eyes. If you see me on camera, if you're watching on the video,
yeah,
I've had my eyes on TweetDeck pretty much all night long. Not football related, but for the couple Sabre fans who may be looming here, lurking, watching on the video side anyway, they've given up 7 goals tonight. They lose. They go winless in 6. They beat Edmonton on Monday. They go to Detroit and they are down 7-3. Good thing they gave a goalie 5-year contract for $5 million a year. That team sucks. I don't want to get into them. All right, back to, I'll tell you one other team too before we get out of that I actually liked. And I know they've overpaid on some of these, but I'll tell you, the New England Patriots,
yeah,
in a way that I didn't expect, maybe I should have, they've really put some work in on their team. But it's not to give Drake May some stud weapons or things like that. It's the defense. Milton Williams many consider the prize of this free agent class.
Mhm.
He was going to Carolina. I was like, well, good. And then all of a sudden he's not. And then he ended up with New England. I'm like, shit, man. So Milton Williams, they get in for the defensive line. Harold Landry was a guy that I would have been more than happy to pick up once Tennessee cut him. He's up with the Patriots. A good linebacker, Robert Spillane from the Raiders. They get him. Carlton Davis, a really good corner from Detroit. That's 4 brand new, talented starters on a defense with Mike Vrabel, who's won a lot as their head coach. Offensively, Morgan Moses, I mean, he'll help a little bit, but he's old. Mac Hollins, who has played, I mean, he was with McDaniel when he had that 690 yards with the Raiders 2 years ago. Offense still has plenty of work to do, not very talented. But look, there are still some, they got money. They got a lot of money. And there's still some receivers, Amari Cooper, Diggs. There's types of receivers out there that they could still add that could definitely help them. Last question, because I forgot to ask you until I just mentioned his name. Mac Hollins. Did we talk about Mac? I don't know. We talk about so many damn things here. That might have been, I know for me, it was the biggest surprise. Yeah, we did. We talked about him earlier, just going to New England. Good for him. I thought he was a great fit in Buffalo. I think that was a mistake. Even if he's wide receiver 5 in special teams, $4 to $4.5 million a year, to me, was not have been an overpay. That would have been good value. He brings a lot of value to that team in the locker room, in the sidelines, blocking. I think that was a mistake. We're giving Brandon Beane a lot of credit. I'm going to knock him down a peg or two because I thought letting Mac Hollins go and not re-signing him was a mistake. But yeah, you agree? Like, here's a hot take. I think the Patriots are going to be the second best team in AFC East this year.
Oh yeah, I would 100% agree with that. They still need to work on their offensive line. Just Morgan Moses isn't going to cut it, but they if they can get that offensive line figured out to keep Drake May on his feet, like that dude's got so much talent, and Vrabel, has done this before, like you said. I think the pieces are really starting to fall into place with them. They have a ton of cap space. They're going to swoop in with this second wave of free agency and sign like probably 3 offensive linemen to go out and compete. And really, like, they could do some damage this year.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for this live stream and this podcast. We'll be back to normal next week. Matt will be on with me on the Wednesday shows. Appreciate Matt as always. This is a lot of fun. Big thank you, by the way. About 700 or so people watching us on the video side live. Really cool. So thank you to all of you, the people who have commented as well. If you have not yet subscribed to the show, please make sure you do. Going to be live one more time this week, Thursday night, 9 p.m. Chris Ostrander from 2 in the Box. He'll come on to give some of his takes and insight on the Bills in the NFL. And we will, unfortunately, spend some time talking about the Buffalo Sabres. Chris, of course, is a hockey guy as well. So thank you very much, Matt. And thank you again, all of you. And I'll be back, brand new show live tomorrow.